the doorway promise. The palace was unusually quiet that morning. Not silent, palaces never truly were, but softer, slower. Like even the walls understood someone inside needed peace. Corporal Adrian Hale stood at his post outside the private residential wing, shoulders straight, expression neutral, breathing measured. 10 years of royal service had trained him to be invisible and unshakable. But today something felt different. Servants walked lighter. Voices stayed hushed. Even radios were turned low. Everyone knew Her Royal Highness was recovering from an illness that required rest and privacy. Official statements were careful and respectful. Staff followed strict instructions. Protect routine, protect dignity, protect the children's sense of normal life. Hale respected that more than anything. Then he saw him. The youngest prince. Standing in front of a bedroom door. Small shoulders squared. Tiny hand gripping the handle like it was the most important job in the world. Prince Louis didn't notice the guard at first. He was staring straight ahead, listening. Inside the room, faint movement. Soft voices. Medical equipment humming quietly. The boy shifted his weight but didn't leave. Hale had guarded state entrances during protests. He had stood through winter storms during ceremonies. He had faced shouting crowds without blinking. But this felt heavier. Because this was love. Raw. Instinctive. Untrained. Footsteps approached down the corridor. Measured. Confident. Important. Staff walked ahead, then stepped aside respectfully. Behind them walked the queen consort. Elegant. Calm. Concern written carefully behind composed eyes. Good afternoon, she said warmly. Louis turned. Polite training met fierce protectiveness inside his small face. Hello. Is your mother resting? She asked gently. Louis nodded. I'd like to see her. His grip tightened. She's sleeping. I won't stay long. Silence stretched. Hale remained statue still, but his attention sharpened. Louis inhaled slowly, like he was remembering something someone had told him. Then he said it. Mummy is busy. Not rude. Not loud. Just final. The queen consort paused. Not offended. Not angry. Just surprised. I understand, she said softly. But I came because I care about her. Louis didn't move. Hale saw his knees tremble slightly. But he stayed planted. She needs quiet, Louis said. Then the boy did something Hale would remember forever. He stepped back and spread both arms across the door. Like a tiny guard. Protecting his post. Protecting his world. Inside movement stirred. The door opened slightly. A pale but warm voice said, Louis darling? Everything froze. The moment balanced between protocol and humanity. The queen consort stepped back first. That was the moment Hale understood something powerful. True strength wasn't rank. It wasn't title. It wasn't authority. Sometimes. It was a 6-year-old boy who loved his mum more than he feared consequences. And Hale knew, this moment would stay with him for the rest of his life. The guard's memory, extended continuation. Corporal Adrian Hale did not talk about palace moments outside of work. That was rule number 1. But that evening, sitting at his small wooden kitchen table with a cup of tea growing cold beside him, he found himself quieter than usual. His wife, Sarah, watched him from across the table. 20 years of marriage had taught her how to read the tiny changes most people missed. You saw something today, she said gently. Hale looked up. Not shocked. Just thoughtful. Yes. Bad. He shook his head slowly. No. The opposite. He stared at his hands for a moment, hands trained to react fast, to protect, to stay steady under pressure. Do you remember when Ellie blocked the front door when you were sick? He asked. Sarah smiled instantly. She was 5. She told the delivery driver to go away because Mum is sleeping and sleeping is medicine. Hale nodded. I saw something like that today. He didn't give names. Didn't give details. Just the feeling. A child standing between the world and someone they loved. Sarah reached across the table and squeezed his hand. That means she's raising him right. Hale swallowed slowly. Because that was exactly what he had thought. The palace, 3 days later. Life inside the palace moved carefully. Schedules adjusted quietly. Meetings shortened. Corridors stayed calmer. Recovery was slow, steady, private. And Prince Louis had developed a new habit. Checking. Every hour. Soft knock. Mummy? Yes, darling. Are you okay? I am. Do you need water? No, love. Okay. I'll come back later. Staff noticed. Not in an annoying way. In a heartbreaking way. Because children should worry about homework and games, not recovery schedules. One afternoon, Nanny found him sitting outside the bedroom door with a drawing pad. "What are you doing here, sweetheart?" she asked. "Guarding," he said simply. "From what?" He thought carefully. "From too much talking." Nanny had to blink fast to stop tears. Inside the bedroom, Princess Catherine sat propped against pillows, reading messages from well-wishers. She looked tired, but stronger than before. Louis walked in slowly. Not running. Not bouncing. Careful. Like he thought loud footsteps could break something fragile. He climbed onto the bed beside her. "What are you reading?" he asked. "Letters," she said softly. "From people wishing us well. Do they know you're getting better?" "I hope so," he thought. Then handed her the drawing he'd been working on. It showed a woman inside a bright castle. But the castle had no walls. Just light around it. "What's this?" she asked. "That's you." "Why no walls?" "Because you don't need walls," he said proudly. "You have us." For a moment she couldn't speak. She just hugged him. Tightly. Meanwhile, the guard's perspective. Hale stood at post later that week, watching the private wing hallway like always. But now, every time he saw the young prince pass, he noticed something different. Less tension. More normal child energy returning. One afternoon, Louis ran past chasing his sister, laughing loudly. Hale felt something release inside his chest. Good. That was good. Children should laugh. Not stand guard. The staff room conversation. Late one evening, two senior staff spoke quietly over tea. "He's checking on her constantly," one said. "Yes," the other replied. "But she says it helps her more than medicine sometimes. Children don't realize how powerful they are." "No," the other said softly. "But love does." Neither noticed Hale entering. But he heard that last line. And it stayed with him. The turning point moment. One afternoon, something small but important happened. Louis arrived at the bedroom door. Raised his hand to knock. Then stopped. Thought. Lowered his hand. And walked away. Not because he didn't care. Because he trusted she was resting. When Catherine later heard this, she smiled with tears in her eyes. "He's learning balance," William said quietly. "He shouldn't have to learn that yet," she replied. "He's learning it because he loves you," William said gently. The guard calls home again. That night, Hale called his daughter. "Hey kiddo." "Hi Dad." "How was school?" She talked nonstop for 5 minutes. Then paused. "Dad." "Yes." "You sound happy." He smiled. "I saw something good today." "What?" "A reminder that strong people don't always look strong." She thought. "Like when Mum was sick and still made my lunch?" Exactly like that. The emotional close of part 2. Weeks passed. Recovery improved. Routine returned. But Hale knew something most people didn't. Palaces weren't just about history. They were about moments. Quiet ones. Invisible ones. Moments where love stood in doorways and said, "Not today. She needs rest." And sometimes, those were the moments that made history in hearts, not headlines. The day he learned what strength really means. Spring arrived quietly that year. Not with celebration. Not with loud public appearances. But with small signs of life returning. Flowers in the palace gardens opened slowly, like they were careful not to rush time. Sunlight stayed longer in the sky. Birds returned to the hedges outside the residential wing. And inside the palace, life was slowly, carefully becoming normal again. But for Prince Louis, something inside him had changed. He was still playful. Still mischievous. Still the little brother who ran too fast down hallways and laughed too loudly at dinner. But there was a new layer inside him. Awareness. The morning that started differently. One morning, Louis woke earlier than usual. The palace was still quiet. He slipped out of bed, padded across the carpet and opened his bedroom door carefully. No running. No sliding in socks. Just walking. Thinking. He stood in the hallway for a moment. Looking toward his mother's room. Old habit. Check on her. Make sure she was okay. But then he remembered something his father had told him. You don't have to carry grown-up worries. Louis took a deep breath. Turned away from the hallway. And went to the kitchen instead. For the first time since everything had happened. He chose to be a child. And downstairs, when the chef offered him toast shaped like a dinosaur, Louis grinned like the world was simple again. The library conversation. Later that afternoon, William asked Louis to join him in the library. Not serious. Not scary. Just quiet father time. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, warming the old wood shelves filled with books that had seen centuries. William sat in a chair near the fireplace. Louis climbed into the chair across from him, swinging his legs. "Hey Lou," William said softly. "Hi Papa. Can we talk about something important?" Louis nodded. William leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Do you remember the day you stood outside Mummy's room?" Louis looked down. "Yes." "What were you feeling?" Louis thought for a long time. "Like, if I didn't stay there, something bad might happen." William nodded slowly. "That's called fear mixed with love. It's very powerful." "Was I wrong?" William shook his head. "No. But I want to teach you something." Louis looked up. "Strength isn't just protecting people," William said gently. "It's also trusting other people to help protect them too." Louis blinked. Processing. "So, I don't have to do it alone?" "Never," William said firmly. "The lesson about courage." William stood and walked to the window. "Do you know what courage really is?" he asked. "Fighting dragons?" Louis guessed. William smiled. "Sometimes. But real courage is doing the right thing, even when you're scared. And sometimes, the right thing is asking for help." Louis sat very still. Because this felt important. "Papa?" "Yes." "Were you scared when Mummy was sick?" William didn't answer right away. Then he said honestly, "Yes." Louis nodded slowly. Because if his dad, strong, calm, always in control dad, could be scared, then maybe fear wasn't weakness. Maybe it was just being human. The corridor moment, again. That evening, Louis walked past his mother's room again. The same door. The same hallway. But this time he didn't stop. Instead he knocked once, softly. Came inside. Gave her a hug. Then said, "I'm going to play outside." And ran off laughing. From down the corridor, Corporal Hale watched it happen. And he felt proud. Not because the boy was brave. Because the boy was healing. The conversation with his sister. Later, Charlotte found Louis sitting in the garden grass. "Are you okay?" she asked, sitting beside him. "Yeah." "You were worried before," she said gently. "I know." "What changed?" Louis thought carefully. Then said something simple. "Papa said I don't have to be the only guard." Charlotte smiled. "That sounds like Papa." They sat quietly watching ducks on the pond. Just kids again. The private family dinner. That night at dinner, something felt lighter. More laughter. More teasing. More normal. At one point, Catherine reached across the table and squeezed Louis's hand. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" he asked. "For loving me so fiercely." He grinned. "That's easy." The guard's reflection. That night, Hale wrote something in a notebook. Not palace secrets. Not details. Just a thought. Love teaches courage. Family teaches balance. And sometimes the smallest people teach the biggest lessons. The emotional turning point. A week later, Catherine walked outside into the garden for the first time in months. Slow steps. Careful breathing. But smiling. The children walked beside her. Not protecting. Just accompanying. And from a distance, Hale watched history happen in the quietest possible way. A family choosing strength together. Not alone. End of part 3. Emotional close. Sometimes courage looks like standing in front of a door. Sometimes courage looks like stepping away from it. And growing up isn't about becoming strong enough to carry everything. It's about learning you were never meant to carry it alone. The moment the world almost saw. Summer arrived in London with soft golden mornings and long evenings that painted the palace gardens in warm light. For the first time in months, life inside the palace didn't feel fragile. It felt hopeful. Recovery had not been fast. It had not been easy. But it had been steady. And steady was everything. The announcement. One quiet Monday morning, senior staff received notice. A small public appearance would happen soon. Not large. Not dramatic. Just a simple outdoor charity garden event. Carefully planned. Carefully timed. Carefully controlled. Inside the private residence, Catherine sat reading the event briefing while William watched her carefully. "You don't have to do this," he said softly. "I know," she replied. "But I want to. Not to prove anything. Not to silence rumors. Not to meet expectations. But because she felt ready. And that mattered more than anything. The children hear the news." Later that afternoon, the children were called into the sitting room. "We have something to tell you," William said. Louis immediately tensed. Not fear. Just protective instinct waking up again. "Mummy might attend a small garden event next week," Catherine said gently. George nodded calmly. Charlotte smiled proudly. Louis blinked. "Will you get tired?" he asked. Maybe a little, she admitted. But I'll have help. And I'll rest before and after. Louis thought very hard. Then nodded slowly. Okay. And everyone in the room understood how big that okay was. The guard prepares. Corporal Hale was assigned to outer garden security for the event. Nothing unusual. But he knew what it meant. This wasn't just another appearance. This was a step back into normal life. And sometimes those steps were harder than standing still. The night before. That evening Louis couldn't sleep. Not because he was scared. Because he was thinking. He walked quietly to his mother's room. Knocked once. Come in, she said. He climbed onto the bed beside her. Are you nervous? He asked. She smiled. A little. Me too. She kissed his forehead. Being brave doesn't mean you're not nervous. He nodded. He was starting to understand that. Event day, the garden. The morning arrived bright and warm. Flowers were in full bloom. Guests gathered respectfully. Press were positioned far back, controlled, distant. Security was layered but calm. Hale stood at his assigned post, scanning automatically, professionally. Then movement near the private garden entrance caught his attention. The family was arriving. William walked beside Catherine, slow but steady. George and Charlotte followed. And Louis walked closest to his mother. Not clinging. Not guarding. Just staying near. Ready. The moment. As Catherine stepped into the sunlight, gentle applause started. Nothing overwhelming. Just warm. Supportive. Human. She smiled. And Hale saw something powerful. Not someone fragile. Someone strong because she had been through something hard. The event itself was simple. Talking to charity volunteers. Looking at children's garden projects. Listening more than speaking. And after 20 minutes, William quietly asked, Ready? She nodded. Time to leave. And that was perfect. Because strength wasn't pushing limits. It was respecting them. The small private moment. As they turned to leave, Louis reached up and slipped his hand into hers. Not for cameras. Not for attention. Just because he wanted to. And she squeezed back. Hale looked away respectfully. But inside he felt something settle. The boy who had stood guard at a door. Now understood he didn't have to stand alone. The world sees, but doesn't know why it matters. News later reported. Princess attends small garden event. Royal family appears united and positive. Short but meaningful appearance. Simple headlines. But they didn't know the real story. The story of recovery. The story of family. The story of a child learning what strength truly means. That evening, the palace again. Back home, Catherine rested. Louis burst into her room later. You did it. She laughed softly. We did it. The guard's realization. That night, Hale stood final shift of the day. Watching sunset light stretch across palace stone. And he realized something. History isn't always loud. Sometimes. It's quiet steps. Short appearances. Small hands holding bigger ones. Emotional close of part 4. The world saw a woman return to public life. But the people who truly understood saw something deeper. A family that had walked through fear together. And came out stronger. Not because they were royal. Because they were human. The legacy of a quiet kind of courage. Autumn returned to London with cool mornings and golden leaves drifting across palace courtyards. Life had changed. Not dramatically from the outside. But deeply, in the quiet spaces only families truly understand. Inside the palace, routines were stronger now. Not because things were perfect. Because everyone understood how fragile perfect could be. 1 year later. The palace gardens looked almost the same. But inside the family, something had grown stronger. Recovery had continued. Slow days still existed. Rest was still important. But laughter had returned fully. And Louis was different in the best possible way. Still playful. Still energetic. Still the child who sometimes forgot where he left his shoes. But now, he understood something most children didn't yet. Love meant being there. Not fixing everything. Not stopping everything. Just being there. The school moment. One afternoon at school something small happened. Another student was upset. Parents were late picking them up. They sat alone worried. Most kids kept playing. Louis walked over and sat beside them. You're not alone, he said simply. The teacher noticed. Not dramatic. Not heroic. Just kind. Later that week, the teacher quietly told palace staff. He's very emotionally aware. Hale heard about it through quiet staff conversations. And he smiled. Because he remembered the doorway. The guard nears retirement. Years of service eventually bring change. Corporal Hale received notice of retirement planning. Not immediate, but soon. One evening he stood at the same corridor where everything had started. Same door. Same polished floors. Same quiet palace air. Different boy now. Different family moment. But same love. The unexpected thank you. 2 weeks before retirement, Hale was asked to report to a small internal staff reception. Nothing formal. Just appreciation for long service. He expected handshakes. Maybe a certificate. Instead he received something else. A small handwritten card. From the family. Inside it read, "Thank you for always protecting our home with respect and kindness." No big speech. No spotlight. Just gratitude. And for a guard. That meant everything. The final corridor walk. On his final day, Hale walked the residential corridor one last time. Not on duty. Just remembering. He paused near the bedroom door where years ago, a small boy had stood with arms stretched wide. And Hale whispered quietly to himself, "You did good, kid." Years pass, time moves forward. Children grow. Families evolve. Life keeps moving. Louis grew taller, stronger, more confident. But one thing never changed. He stayed deeply loyal to the people he loved. And he never forgot what he learned as a child. You don't have to carry everything alone. The future echo. Many years later, during a charity visit, Louis met a young child visiting a hospital family member. The child looked scared, overwhelmed. Louis knelt down and said gently, "It's okay to be worried. That just means you care a lot." The child nodded slowly. And in that moment, the lesson passed forward. The guard's life after service. Hale retired to a quiet life with his wife. Garden work. Long walks. Tea in the afternoon. But sometimes when news showed royal events, he'd remember. Not ceremonies. Not uniforms. Not headlines. He remembered a small boy. A door. And 3 words. "Mummy is busy." Final emotional reflection. History remembers big moments. Ceremonies. Speeches. Crowds. But the moments that shape hearts are usually quiet, private, invisible. A child protecting a parent. A parent teaching a child when to be strong and when to let others help. Final moral closing YouTube style. True strength is not standing alone against the world. True strength is knowing who stands beside you. Love doesn't make people weak. It makes them brave enough to care. And sometimes, the most powerful stories never make headlines. They live quietly. Inside families. Inside memories. Inside the hearts of people who were there. The end.